Sorry? Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. This is the first time we've met physically because the government failed to produce legislation to mean that we could meet remotely. I'm saying hello and good to see you, but of course I can't. This Perspex screen is very poor, so I have vague blobs in front of me instead of people, so I'm going to have to guess who they are. So nice to see, to try to see people. So just to say, there's been a risk assessment done. Mr. Williams, you have a green spot here. That's for anything in particular, or generally that's good. Likewise, there's been a risk assessment that says we can get 30 people within this room. We're trialling it today. There are some issues that we'll need to resolve. That we need to make sure that we keep distance between ourselves, and microphones need to be suitably placed. So the two people I'm worried about is Pam and whoever is behind Pam, because you don't seem as if you're 2 meters away from each other, Pam. And is it? You're right? Okay, fine. They're on their green spots. All right. Okay, well, welcome. Apologies for absence. I've got apologies from Councillor Chris Atwell, who's on leave, and Councillor Jason Fasakli, who had his COVID jab yesterday and has had an adverse reaction. Any other apologies from absence? No declarations of interest, colleagues? Any declarations of interest? Nope. We then go on to item 3, record of previous decisions. Colleagues, are you happy with the minutes of those meetings? Okay, thank you very much. Just 2 quick things. First of all, I think I'd like to record my thanks to colleagues who are no longer on the Cabinet for their service, because I think it's important to record that. So thank you to Councillor Lee Hunt, Councillor Matthew Winnington, and Councillor Steve Pitt for their work on the Council, which is much appreciated, and I think it's important that we minute our thanks to them for the work they did in the previous municipal year. Secondly, just to let colleagues know, I'm becoming increasingly concerned about the lack of a government announcement in terms of the booster programme for COVID injections, and so I'll be writing to the government today to ask them to let people know what the programme is so that people can plan. I think it's very important in terms of controlling the pandemic, but also I think it's very important for everybody else to be able to plan around what's going to be happening with the boosters so that it is open and clear. Okay, let's move on to item 4, clean air zones, additional exemptions and sunset periods. Hayley, you want to leap in?
Thank you very much. I understand we've got some deputations.
Oh yes, sorry, beg your pardon.
Thank you.
So, beg your pardon, and there should be, yes, thank you for reminding me, Hayley. I haven't read my script yet. So I'm telling you, I think I've done most of it. So we've asked everybody to have had a test before lateral flow test before they came in, and to make sure that they're all right. There's limited public seating here to try to make sure that we keep safe. Matthew, good to see you. Thank you for coming. And we need to keep you need to keep seated during the meeting, and if you're going to move around, please put a mask back on. If the fire alarm is sounded, it's not expected, so meet under Queen Victoria's feet. We're live streaming everybody, so that goes on. So we've got 6 deputations. So, Jane, do you want to start on deputations in terms of the clean air zone?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so the first one is from Sally Hedgecoe. She says, please do not reject the exemption for motorhomes designated HGV. I am against rejection. By rejecting an exemption for motorhomes designated HGV, the council is penalising, in particular the residents of the Isle of Wight who own such vehicles. The crossing alone costs a great deal of money, and with this £50 additional CAZ fee, and absolutely no choice of route other than straight into the zone, island residents are, I consider, not being given the same opportunity as in other cities, where there are alternative routes allowing travel outside the zones. Obviously, it is, by its very nature, this will also seriously impact the tourist industry on the island too, without us having any input to decisions. Okay. Second one is from Lindsay Thompson. Please can I ask that the vote to exempt motorhomes from the clean air does not happen, as motorhome owners are plans to go to France aren't happening fit the next few years, so we'll be looking for holidays here. If there is an extra £50 charge, it rules out Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. Number 3 is from David Blackman. I would like to register my objection to the council voting against an exemption for privately owned HGV motorhomes in the CAZ. There is no alternative route to or from the ferry port, which would impact travel to the Isle of Wight. Please do not reject an exemption for motorhome owners. Okay, so number 4 is from David Carr. I would urge you to include motorhomes in the exemptions from your proposed Clean Air Act legislation. I use Brittany Ferry sailings from Portsmouth and feel that it is not appropriate for vehicles in transit to the port to be penalised. Number 5 is from Rona Dejelani. People do not vote to reject, please do not vote to reject exemption for HGV motorhomes. This will seriously impact people travelling to the Isle of Wight. The 6th one is from Ben Magee. I have been put in your direction by my friend regarding the Portsmouth City Council low emission zone. Apparently there is a discussion taking place to potentially no longer allow HGVs or motorhomes to be exempt. If you are counting votes, I'd like to vote against these vehicles are still exempt, please. Reason being, I live on the Isle of Wight, and a lot of the industry here is reliant on tourists. As a resident, the delivery charges for goods is already high already. I am concerned this move will further strangle the island's economy as people look for easier alternatives, for example Cornwall, and this may be the final nail in the coffin for them. I do, however, agree Portsmouth needs a low emission zone, but could there be a route specific for ferry passengers that is outside this zone? And the 7th one is from Tracy Juby. I would like to object to the recommendation to reject the exemption for motorhomes. We do not have a large motorhome, it is only 6 metres in length. However, it is 3.85 tonnes and therefore is classed as a private HGV and ironically cheaper for road tax at only £160 as opposed to one which is 3.5 tonnes and therefore classed as a private light goods with road tax of £260. We will be charged £50 each way, and with only 2 persons, that is adding £100 per trip and will make us think twice about taking trips. Why should residents of the Isle of Wight be charged so heavily because we have no choice but to travel through the zone? Residents of Portsmouth can choose to take another route, but we cannot. We cannot afford to purchase a motorhome made since 2016, which fall into Eurozone 6 and therefore not chargeable, whatever its size. It seems absurd that the continental port, with all its polluting ships, isn't part of the emission zone, and therefore no vehicles are charged. Surely it would be fairer to either remove the zone away from the Isle of Wight ferry and its exits, or allow a certain number of crossings to be exempt before charges come into play.
Well, thanks, Jane. That's very kind. I'm sorry, Hayley, back to yourself.
Thanks very much, Leader. So today, Cabinet, I bring a report about some additional exemptions and sunset periods for the clean air zone. So you might remember last year, following the detailed public consultation, we brought a report to you to consider some exemptions. These are in addition to those already agreed, following further requests that we've had from members of the public. So there are quite a few for consideration today. The first one is what we're calling a stopgap sunset period for non-compliant vehicles that have applied for our Clean Air Fund to replace or retrofit their vehicles, but due to problems outside of their control, for example, supply issues, they just won't be able to replace their vehicles in time. So for those vehicles, we're suggesting a time-limited exemption so they've got time to replace their vehicle. The next one is a fee waiver. for bus and coach services operating for emergency rail replacement. So these are the vehicles that are brought in at the last minute when there's an accident or an issue on the railways. Previous experience of emergency rail replacement suggests that this happens once or twice a year, so it's not a regular occurrence. And for each occurrence, there are about 6 trips into the CAS each day. The next one is a 2-year sunset period for the provision of domestic refuse collection vehicles that travel within the CAS. As you'll be aware, refuse collection for domestic homes is a statutory service that Portsmouth City Council provides for residents, and we are requesting that 12 of the total fleet of refuse collection vehicles are given a temporary sunset period exemption ahead of them retendering the service in 2023. We are aware that these vehicles, as heavy goods vehicles, are adding to the pollution in the zone. So the suggestion is that the exemption is only granted on the provision that they run their entire refuse collection fleet on alternative fuel, which will reduce the nitrogen dioxide emissions as well as the carbon emissions of the entire refuse collection fleet. The next one is an exemption for 10 trips per year for horse transporters classified as heavy goods vehicles. These vehicles are important for people to be able to transport their horses to specialist veterinary facilities on the mainland, and you'll see in the appendix to the report there have been a lot of requests from residents of the Isle of Wight who are concerned that without this exemption they're going to struggle to get to the horse vet on the mainland. The next one that is considered in the report is a proposal for the exemption of motorhomes classified as heavy goods vehicles. The recommendation in the report is that we reject this proposed exemption. This is because, unlike the horse transporters, the motorhomes are for leisure use. It's not essential travel. There's no kind of animal welfare issues as related to the horse transporters. So we're proposing that this one is not approved. The next one is a exemption for hybrid vehicles that do not meet the relevant CAS Euro standards. So for our CAS, vehicles need to be Euro 6 if diesel or Euro 4 if petrol. If they're a hybrid vehicle, they are classified by the diesel or petrol part of their engine. We're aware that in our taxi and private hire fleet we have one vehicle that is a Euro 5 hybrid. This exemption, if we opened it up, would allow vehicles that aren't licensed in Portsmouth to come in and drive in the city if they're non-compliant. Apologies. So we're proposing that we reject this exemption because it's going to open up cross-border hiring for non-compliant vehicles. The one vehicle that we know that would be affected by this exemption who is licensed in Portsmouth, we've spoken to the gentleman and he's happy to apply for our Clean Air Fund instead to replace his vehicle. The next one is an exemption for pre-planned rail replacement services. So these are the ones at the weekend when you get the train and they say, oh no, you're on the bus instead because we're doing maintenance work. So we're suggesting this is rejected because it is pre-planned. The rail operating companies reasonably could say to their suppliers, no, we need a Euro 6 compliant vehicle. And then finally, we're recommending that this is the final consideration of exemptions and sunset periods. You'll be aware that we have to make a legal charging order before the CAS goes live, and that takes time to do. So we can't keep revisiting these issues. So we're recommending that today is the last time we consider any further exemptions and sunset periods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have discovered that there was a film over this thing, which I have now removed, so I can now see everybody. I think it was designed to cause confusion, but I'm pleased that I've been able to remove it so I can actually see who people are. So, Hayley, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, anybody want to come into the debate on the Clean Air Zone exemptions and sunset periods? So David.
Thank you. Either is fine. As regards to Clean Air Zone, it's one of those things we struggle with, isn't it? It's just the ministerial directive was put upon us. We didn't have a choice for it, but it seems very odd, really, that we're trying, our preferred method would be to encourage people to use things like public transport, and this Clean Air Zone seems to punish things like buses and taxis and private hires, but we've got to go with what we've been given on this. It doesn't address the real issue, which is too many cars, something that Councillor Stagg has been saying for many years, and something which a lot of people agree. So it's kind of a clean air zone that we have to try and make work. Our preferred solution were obviously to get the money to, as I've said before, get alternative modes of transport. One of the things you asked for, wasn't it, Leader? We put together the package to ask for, if the government could subsidise bus travel, for example, or even make it for free, or a scrappage scheme to get the taxis to electric vehicles. But we've got short shrift on that. We've done a lot of work on this clean air zone, and I know that Hayley and I know that the team there have been working a lot with businesses and organisations around. We've in fact set up 4 posts to engage with organisations such as the taxi trade, and we've had to consult. We've managed to secure funding to get people's vehicles upgraded, because that's what we should be worried about. It shouldn't be about wanting people to pay to pollute. We'd rather there was just cleaner fuel and no pollution. I think that would be a perfect clean air opportunity for Portsmouth. So you can see in there where where that's done with the refuse vehicles, for example. They're going to be run on cleaner fuel, which I believe will reduce CO2 by something like 90% as well. So that's got to be a win. So that's worried about cleaner air. It's actually going to be clean air. It's going to be beneficial to the area which it's going to be in. But the other things on that, like the horse boxes, for example. I know we're not exactly overrun with horse boxes in Fratton and Charles Dickens, but at the same time, I can understand that if it's for animal welfare, people might need to get over here, and we don't really want to penalise them for that. So they haven't been exempted completely. I believe it's a restricted number of trips, isn't it? Yeah, which makes sense. But we have been liaising, since the directive came in, with other local authorities about what they've been doing. Anything, the unknown consequences and unseen consequences, and that's why there's been lots of reports coming about possible exemptions or loopholes or things. So we've been trying to tidy that up to make it work as best as possible for that, and I think we've managed now to do all that to make it work for Portsmouth and to make it work for the best. So I'm happy to endorse these recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I, Matthew? Oh yeah, I haven't got any. I know that Kimberly and Lynn will want to come in, but let's do Kimberly first, and Matthew then, if you want to leap in. And Lynn, you wanted to come in as well?
Not necessarily.
No. Okay. Well, let's go Kimberly and Matthew then.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you to the officers for bringing this report in. I've come into this quite late in what's been going on, but it's been really interesting to see what's been happening before I became a councillor. And see how hard the officers have been working, not just liaising with other councils and areas that have the clean air zones already or coming in, but also to look at the kind of exemptions that we're looking at today, and like Dave said, the loopholes that we might face. I think it's got to a time, after seeing what all the things that have been brought forward, that now's the time to put an end to any more exemptions and sunset periods. I think we've got to the point where we know what the issues are. But it's also been very interesting to say, I didn't realise that there are more horses per people in the Isle of Wight. That was something interesting. That was my fact for the day when I found that out. But I think it's being realistic as well. This is not a council-imposed clean air zone. This is a government-imposed clean air zone, and we've got to be realistic but work with what we can. And I think these proposals are a step forward in the right direction to try and bring the air quality back to where it should be. And let's be honest, in an ideal world we would all not want this. We would want to be breathing the clean air and not toxic air. So I just wanted to thank the officers for bringing this forward, but also it's really good to see that they're with the refuse vehicles that they're going to use hydro-treated vegetable oil, which, like Dave said, will bring down the CO2, and it gives a time period for vehicles to turn over to electric by 2023, which is it's what I personally would hope would be the people doing coming forward with electric vehicles. So, no, I'm happy to support this as well, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, welcome.
Thank you very much, Leader. I just wanted to come, partly on behalf of colleagues on the Isle of Wight, and partly because of the number of deputations on it, just to quickly put the point about caravans and the Isle of Wight, because clearly there is a situation where people can own quite a substantial investment in a vehicle. It is difficult, as one of the deputations alluded to get a CAS compliant motorhome without spending a very large sum of money. We aren't necessarily talking about people who have huge sums of money here, because sometimes as retirees or people low incomes make an investment in a motorhome for, to cover the cost of many holidays. And so if you own a motorhome, if you've owned one for a number of years and you live on the Isle of Wight, this could potentially impose a significant extra cost on you. And I think, as a number of the deputies noted, there is no alternative route via Portsmouth which can get you to the Isle of Wight without travelling through the CAS. Now, I also understand the City Council's concerns about this. I also understand the difficulty of an exemption. However, I do note that you've chosen to include an exemption for horse boxes, which is limited to a certain number of trips, and could not something similar have been done around caravans or caravans that are resident on the Isle of Wight in particular? Now, I don't know how easy it would be to add residential requirements to it, but I just wanted to check that, that all these options were considered and explored, because I do think it should be recognised that this proposal, and I recognise what you're saying about the government requiring CAS, and before that it was an EU proposal, an EU requirement, of course, which we've retained. But at the same time, this is a decision within the control of this City Council, and I think if we wanted to be good neighbours to certain residents of the Isle of Wight, and I recognise that we're talking about holiday travel, that is a cost that people can add to their holidays, though I do think we should recognise there is a knock-on cost potentially on local businesses, like the ferries, like the campsites on the Isle of Wight. But I do understand why the Council doesn't want to pursue a general exemption for motorhomes, but I do think consideration could and should be given to specific exemptions for existing owners of motorhomes who are resident on the Isle of Wight. And that's really all I wanted to say on the issue.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. David, you've had your talk. You've had your say.
Is it all right to address a point?
As long as it's very quick.
It is just a point. As regards the motorhomes and we're given a limited amount of trips to horse boxes, horse transporters, that's because it says it in there, there's no equine hospitals on the Isle of Wight, so they will have to come over here for animal welfare. So that was the difference between someone coming over on a motorhome and someone coming over on that. So that was the difference between that one. Just want to point that out, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. And I think the issue of there being no alternative, there are alternatives. We know this clean air zone plan by the government is very badly thought out, and that it's just about diverting pollution. It's not about reducing pollution. If somebody lives in Ryde, it'll be less air pollution if they come via Portsmouth, but the government aren't interested in that, so that they'll force people to drive to Cowes and then go to the Southampton Cowes one, or across to Yarmouth and go up to Lymington, because the government aren't interested in reducing air pollution. They're just interested in moving it and increasing it in other places. So there are alternatives, but this is a very, very badly thought out scheme by government. It shows real lack of imagination, but it's being imposed on the people of Portsmouth and businesses, which will be bad for businesses, and on the people on the Isle of Wight, which will be bad for them as well. So this is badly thought out, but that's the government's decision for you, and it won't surprise anybody that they've thought this out very, very badly. So, colleagues, I'm happy to recommend the recommendations in the report. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. And if people are unhappy with this, I suggest they take that up with Conservative members of Parliament, either in the Isle of Wight or in Portsmouth North, to see if we can get the government to be sensible about this scheme. Okay, let's move along. National Bus Strategy. Thank you. My script says that Peter Shelley is here to introduce. Peter, thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure that Lynn will have a great deal to say about this, because actually this looks as if it's a positive thing that we can look forward to. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon. The Enhanced Partnership is part of the National Bus Strategy for England, published in March 2021. The strategy has a budget of £3 billion and places new responsibilities on local transport authorities to promote bus reliability through an updated network management duty and new powers to enforce moving traffic offences. It also replaces on responsibilities on bus operators to work effectively with the City Council. Failure to commit to an enhanced partnership by the 30th of June 2021 would put current funding at risk. The partnership is to be ambitious, with measurable targets. Failure to be ambitious or to meet targets risks future funding for bus and other transport investments. A successful partnership will unlock the funding on offer. The detail will be in a bus service improvement plan, developed collaboratively with bus operators, residents and user groups, key stakeholders including health and social care, local businesses and other transport operators by the 31st of October 2021. This will be the subject of a separate report to Cabinet. This is an opportunity for buses to support City Council objectives for health, economy, air quality and access to employment, education and training. It supports the Imagine Portsmouth objectives of a green city with excellent air quality and easy travel. Agreement to an enhanced partnership is needed by the 30th of June, to a bus service improvement plan by the 31st of October, with the enhanced partnership itself due to start in April 2022. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Lynn. Push the little button. No, you are pushing.
No,
there we are. Success.
I was pressing, but it was the wrong one. Yes. Thank you, Peter. We have got the lowest take-up of bus use in whole South East England. That's the Portsmouth has, and it's about half of what Southampton does, and about a quarter of Brighton. We need to have fewer cars on our roads because they are polluting. They're also causing congestion. And that doesn't mean to say that we want everybody to get rid of their cars. I mean, I couldn't live without my car. I just use it less. But to use the buses to get places, we need to get that to happen so that we can improve the air quality and improve the health of people travelling, less travelling in cars, using buses far more. By entering into a partnership with the bus companies, and we have got a pretty good relationship, we don't always agree with them, I'm the first to admit, it's an equal thing because they have got to do things to help us, not just us sort of giving in to them. For example, the partnership will require better services, so serving wider areas, and there are parts of Portsmouth that are very badly served by buses. You can't get to these places easily. The buses will be going earlier in the day, so those people, for example, who have shift workers, they can get the buses hopefully earlier in the day and later at night if they've got a late shift. There'll be integrated ticketing, so no longer will you have to buy a separate ticket to go on first from Stagecoach, and hopefully in time we'll have integration with rail as well. That's perhaps a long way off, but that makes life a lot easier and a lot cheaper as well. And that comes to cheaper fares, and we do have higher fares here in Portsmouth than they do in other parts of Hampshire, and that's something we want to sort of see reducing. And we need to have more frequent services. Now, this all fits in as well with other aspects of what's going on in transport. For example, under the South East Hants Rapid Transit schemes, we are introducing more bus-only lanes, which will hopefully take cars off the roads and give bus passengers much quicker times coming into and out of the city. So if we can cut down on some of the traffic that comes into the city and goes out of it as well, it will all help. This is something that is exciting because we have got a good say in it. We've got more power to control what's going on than we have up to now. And so I would hope that we will vote in favour of this. Is just entering into a negotiation partnership to create a partnership with the local bus companies. We're very keen to join us. And I want to add here that First announced just last week that there are 5 areas of the country where they're introducing electric buses. Portsmouth is one of them. And towards the end of next year, we'll have 34 electric-only buses, which is really, really good news. So we have got a good relationship already, and to extend that into a good partnership, I think everybody will benefit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lynn. Hugh.
Question to Councillor Stagg. The third bullet point is cheaper, more low, flat fares in towns and cities. The evidence from Brighton and Hove would seem to be that the 60-minute ticket has been a remarkable success. Are we discussing such things as flat fares and time tickets with the bus companies here? And if not, can we?
We'll be discussing anything and everything that will bring better bus services to Portsmouth. And I agree with what you're saying, Hugh, about the 60-minute one. One of my sons lives in Vancouver, and you can get a 60-minute ticket there. And that's an integrated one. You can use tram, bus, train, or the ferry, the overhead, what you call it? Monorail, that's the one, yes. And for 60 minutes, so if you need to pop into the city to pick something up, you can do that and be back, and that costs, I think it's $2.50, and I think it's £2.60 in Brighton. So I think this would be ideal for a lot of people.
Yes? No? Okay, that's fine. I'm trying to be inclusive. Okay, folks, I think it's a sensible thing, and having been highly critical of government over the last bit, I think we need to be here applauding the fact that the government are putting money into public transport, and we need to recognise that. If we can actually get fares down and more people onto the buses, that's a really, really good thing, and it would change a lot in the city. Bus services across the country have been cut for a long, long time. And everybody in local government across all parties recognises that the denationalisation of the bus services has been a complete disaster. It is across all parties we recognise that, because all it meant is that what used to happen where the unprofitable routes were subsidised by the profitable routes now means that the profitable routes subsidise the shareholders and the unprofitable routes have to be paid for by taxpayers. So that's not worked. So I'm really pleased with this, and I'm absolutely welcome the report, and I hope we will see significant reductions in fares in Portsmouth and significant increase in the number of people using buses, so that we can make sure that people, as Lynn says, leave their cars at home because there's a better and a more economic alternative. So, colleagues, you happy with this report? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, moving on. LTP4. Hayley.
Thanks. I think I'll introduce it. Today, yes. Thanks very much, Leader. So this report sets out the changes that have been made to the draft Portsmouth Transport Strategy, which was approved for public consultation by Cabinet back in July 2020. And it seeks approval by Cabinet for the adoption of, to recommend the adoption of the Transport Strategy and Implementation Plan by full Council. So extensive public consultation was undertaken on the strategy between the end of September 2020 and the 21st of December 2020, the results of which are included in Appendix I, and a number of changes have been proposed to the strategy, and these are presented in Appendix J. The The strategy itself aims to deliver improved connectivity within our city and the wider city region through improved travel choices for our residents, supporting individuals to be less reliant on their car and be able to use their car less, with the aim of improving air quality and overall health outcomes for our community. The associated implementation plan outlines the incremental steps towards the overall goals identified in the strategy, which will act as a framework for delivery over the next 17 years and help us deliver improved connectivity, improved air quality and better travel options for our community.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first say what a huge amount of work has gone into producing this report. You know, it's not just the writing of it, but the work behind it all, because as I think everybody must now realise, there's such a lot to transport and so many different areas. And I know we have had consultants helping, but I mean, it's been up to the officers actually to get this report together. So, and I'd like to go back to a bit further from than this and say how we started all this, because what we did first of all was, I was working with the officers, but they were doing the work and I was just sort of there as a spare part. We looked at the vision for the city's vision, and we looked at how transport could address the aims of the city vision. And then developed an integrated transport strategy. Now, a strategy is essentially a way of addressing the issues that need to be addressed. And then out of that has come LTP4, Local Transport Plan 4, which is how we actually go put that strategy into practice. Another thing I want to say is that everything in transport is dependent, obviously, on funding. We don't get, the funding for the LTP4 is not ring-fenced, so it can be used for anything. So we depend a heck of a lot on putting in bids for money, and that takes up in itself a huge amount of time. The plan is stretching over, I think it's 18 years. It started off a bit less than that. And I think the important thing to remember here is that it is a dynamic plan. It is not static. Every year it will be reviewed as various things are done and achieved. Other things will crop up and will need to be addressed. So it will change. This time next year it won't be exactly the same. So people should need to be aware of that it is dynamic. And I think it's very clearly set out. It's addressing the major problems in the city and the options that we've got, how we can develop what's already in existence, and I would recommend it to everybody to accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to record our thanks to everybody who's worked very hard to get this done. Colleagues, any other contributions, or are we all happy with this? Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 7, Portsmouth International Port Harbour Revision Order. Mike and Ben, welcome. Do you want to launch into this, Mike?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. I'll just do the introduction, and then Ben, our Harbour Master, can explain a little bit more. But this is really seeking approval from the Cabinet to submit a new Harbour Revision Order, which will modernise the powers of general direction for the Harbour Master, deal with things such as antisocial behaviour at the Camber, but also provide the foundations for the future port development as we're starting to pull together, as you know, the Port Master Plan for the next 20 years. I'll stop at this point and I'll let Ben just talk a little bit more about the Harbour Revision Order.
Good morning.
Thanks, Ben. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I think this is the first time you may have met some of us and we might have met you.
But yes, good morning. Ben McInnes. I'm the Harbour Master up at the port. Been at the port for about 8 years now as deputy and pilot, and then I've been Harbour Master for about a year and a half now. So, hello everyone. With respect to the Harbour Revision Order, in early 2020, Ashford's completed a review of all the local harbour legislation on our behalf. The findings of that review established that there is a number of different statutory harbour undertakings for which the Council is a statutory harbour authority. At least 3 separate undertakings, including Mile End Quay, Camber Dock and Flathouse Wharf undertakings, and then other miscellaneous and other undertakings. As each piece of harbour works is undertaken, we've got a new harbour revision order for each piece of works. Each statutory undertaking is governed by a different local harbour legislation. The Council does not currently have powers of harbour direction or general direction in respect of Portsmouth International Port, and other common statutory harbour powers that the Council does not have include no wide general power of dispersal relating to freehold disposal or leasehold disposal of land not required for harbour purposes. We've got no wide modern charging power for services and facilities provided, and they vary greatly between the different undertakings. And there's no standard provision regarding the use of harbour funds from the different undertakings. And there's no modern wide definition of vessel. This falls into play with the camber and jet skis. We haven't got any current power to stop jet skiers going out the harbour from the camber, despite it being prohibited. So Ashford's therefore advised, and we advise the same, that the Council should give careful consideration to proceeding with a harbour revision order application to consolidate and modernise the local harbour legislation applying to the Council as statutory harbour authority for the various undertakings that make up Portsmouth International Port. Harbour revision orders are statutory instruments, and applications are determined by the Marine Management Organisation, or MMO, in accordance with the Harbours Act. So why do we want to do it? Part of our duties under the Port Marine Safety Code are that we review all legislation, including bylaws and directions, on a regular basis. And the Guide to Good Practice on General Directions states that harbour authorities would be well advised to secure these powers to support the effective management of vessels in their harbours. Serious consideration should therefore be given to proceeding with an HRO application to obtain powers of general direction as recommended by the Port Marine Safety Code. Compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code is particularly important for a port as busy as Portsmouth International Port. Further reason to apply for the powers of general direction is that we are extending the standard power of general direction to also cover vehicles and port operations ashore. This means that in future, SHAs with such powers should be able to repeal all or most of their bylaws and instead maintain a set of up-to-date general directions covering both wet and landside operations. These general directions can generally be made and amended in an 8-week period if there are no objections. On the other hand, bylaw applications can often take more than 18 months and incur greater legal fees. We also want a full consolidation and modernisation of the powers and repeal nearly all of the current local harbour legislation. With regards to the application fee, it's currently £4,000, but since 1st of April 2020 an application fee increased to between £15,500 and £17,500 has been anticipated. We're due to get 1 week's notice for such, and as such we've prepared our application that we can submit it at any point from now without incurring those additional fees. So in short, that the Harbour Revision Order takes our existing powers and legislation, modernises it into a modern Harbour Revision Order, gives us powers of general direction in order that we can control vessels and movements around the harbour, and in particular with respect to jet skis and antisocial behaviour around the Camber Docks areas. And by doing it now, we will save money on the application fee to the MMO. So it's the Port's recommendation to the Council that we proceed with the application to the MMO for the Harbour Revision Order.
Thanks both Ben and Mike for that. That's very helpful. This seems an entirely sensible thing to do to bring us up to date, and I think it's yet another example about how the new management team at the port are changing things significantly for the better. So my thanks, both Mike and Ben and the whole team. I think it's particularly important that we have powers to try to make sure that we keep people safe near the Canberra. I am really worried that with the new big White Link ferry and propellers at Four Corners, that there could be a very serious accident there if people are not behaving in a sensible way. So I'm very happy to propose this. Colleagues, any other thoughts? Hugh.
Just briefly, Chairman, given the complexity of legislation around harbours, and especially a harbour such as Portsmouth, where you have the Queen's Harbour Master involved as well, I think anything which brings this together, makes it more coherent, makes it easier for people to use, is to be welcomed. And so I think I certainly welcome this initiative.
Okay. Sir? Any thoughts? No? Sorry. No, you scratched your head at one point and it looked as if you were asking to speak. I think you just bought a picture for a couple of million. Colleagues, I think this is a very sensible thing to do. So colleagues, are you happy with this, that it goes forward? Thanks very much indeed. No, Lisa. Really? Modern slavery. And colleagues, just for completeness, the Harbour Revision Order goes on to full council for approval, and likewise our next one, the modern slavery statement. I think that goes on to full council, doesn't it, as well?
It's just for noting, yeah.
Thank you. Lisa, leap in.
Okay, so hello. Thank you for inviting me, thank you, Leader, and for the humour as well. Thanks, Dan. So the draft modern slavery statement, which you have in front of you, is to be sent to Council for noting and for approval by this Cabinet. The updated statement is attached to Appendix 1. We've sent out another couple of useful reference documents for councillors as well, which are from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Modern Slavery Partnership, and those documents are also available on our children's safeguarding website and our adult safeguarding website. Some members may be aware of the statement from previous years, but for those that are not, publishing a statement in a prescribed format is a requirement for commercial companies and public organisations under Sections 54 of the Modern Slavery Act 2015. And this is the third statement that the Council has published. The Council's responsibilities are broader, of course, than commercial organisations, in that there are also safeguarding requirements as well. Item 2 of the report sets these out, and they are identification and referral of victims, and there's a section with more information in item 2.5. Supporting victims, and this can be through the Safeguarding Children and Adults Board with care and support needs, or through housing and homelessness services. Community safety services and enforcement and disruption activities, both independently and with partners. We are also required to make sure our procurement processes and supply chains are free from modern slavery. The programme of work, there's an annual programme of work, and this year's programme of work for the coming year is set out in item 10 of the statement, and addresses developmental work in relation to strategic leadership, working with partners, raising awareness, developing and expanding our training programmes, procurement and supply chains, and the enforcement and disruption activity, so across the board, really. Portsmouth's Safeguarding Adults and Safeguarding Children's Boards are actively involved in work and lead the work, in fact, to support victims of modern slavery that we come across. In relation to strategic leadership, our Director of Corporate Services, Natasha Edmonds, has taken on the executive lead for modern slavery, which fits really well with the work on social value and community engagement that she's already leading. Natasha will chair a working group that will oversee the delivery of the development programme, and this work also supports the city vision and identifying and supporting victims of modern slavery. So we're under the happy and healthy city and a thriving economy and lifelong learning, of course. So progress against the previous programme of work in 2020 has been limited in some areas given the circumstances, but we have got an e-learning module which has been developed by Portsmouth's Learning and Development Team, and that's now complete and has been circulated across the county. Meetings with all directorate management teams took place between January and March this year, raising awareness, including the International Port, and our emergency planning team are now also involved in revising existing protocols for planned or unplanned discoveries of modern slavery. One of the key pieces of work we're going to be undertaking this year will be supply chain audits of some of our high-risk contracts. So housing are supporting this work in relation to PCC's building contracts. That's all I have got to say at the moment. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The statement needs to be approved, as I say, by the Cabinet, and then it will go on to be signed by the leader before it's uploaded onto the website and then noted at full council.
Okay, colleagues. I think by tradition, I don't think by necessity, but by tradition, we've taken this to full council, and I'd suggest that we do the same this time, if that's okay. So, colleagues, are you happy to send this on to full council? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Moving on to city links with Halifax, Canada and the Falklands. Lydia, welcome.
Hello, thank you, Leader. Can you hear me? Thank you. So this report is to seek to formalise the sister city links between Portsmouth and Halifax in Canada and Portsmouth and the Falkland Islands. The city has supported and maintained a number of relationships with other cities as part of a twinning sister and friendship city process. Our strongest links currently are with European cities, and during this period of economic uncertainty, we are keen to ensure that we have links and opportunities with other parts of the world, and therefore wish to establish links with Halifax and the Falkland Islands to encourage business growth through other partnership routes. An initial report was submitted to the Cabinet on the 4th of February 2020 and proposed that the Leader of the Council write to the Mayor of Halifax and the Legislative Assembly of the Falkland Islands to request establishment of the links. Officers also then undertook some work to determine the general trade themes and collaboration and for improvement, and these are detailed in 3.5 to 3.9 in the report. As a result of this work, we are now seeking agreement to formalise the relationships between the City of Portsmouth and Halifax in Canada and the City of Portsmouth and the Falkland Islands by entering into sister city relationships with them. Just to add, the work to maintain and develop links has continued virtually throughout the pandemic. The virtual trade, investment and education mission held in February, hosted jointly by Halifax and Portsmouth, is a good example of this. This way of working has been successful and has also resulted in lower costs. If agreement is made today, then we will look to agree a work plan to support each sister city link. The focus for the agreed work plan for each relationship will consider supporting economic development between the two cities, along with development of appropriate specialist relationships such as those between the universities and naval links.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lydia. I personally think this is a very sensible thing to do. This is about building relationships and particularly to encourage trade between ourselves and others. Actually, I think, Lydia, things that I've seen that have been very successful over the last few years have been trade missions to China and to Bangladesh, which to foster trade between those countries and ourselves, and I think this is the way in which we should be going and to build those links. Halifax is an obvious one. It was the home of the Royal Navy on the North Atlantic and on the North American peninsula continent, for a long time, and it's now the home of the Canadian Atlantic Navy, and it's where the Type 26s designed in Portsmouth are being built, and so lots of they'll be built in Halifax, but lots of the equipment that go into it will be come from local firms here, and if we can establish better ties there between both the university and local companies, that's great. In the Falklands, it's different. It's the 40th anniversary of the Falklands conflict next year, and I think what we're able to do is to potentially give people in the Falklands benefit of some technical advice and support, because we're a much bigger population base than the Falklands, so we might be able to help there. But I think it does recognise that the task force set off from here and came back from here, that we did lose significant numbers of people during the Falklands conflict, and with the 40th anniversary coming up, this is a sensible thing to do. So I'm happy to propose this. Colleagues, anybody else? Matthew?
Yes, Leader, I entirely agree. I think Halifax and the Falklands, particularly with the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War, are both extremely appropriate twinning partnerships. I only wish to comment that Councillor Mason will see it as a particular challenge to visit the Falkland Islands, given his ambition to visit all our twin cities if possible.
Matthew, I think you're right to highlight that, and I think it needs to be very clear that we're not doing this to cause expense and send councillors around the world at the council's expense. We can now do stuff by Zoom. We've all learnt to work differently, and actually some of the things that we've learnt to do we'll keep doing even when we are allowed to go back to running things in a way that we're more used to. So I'm not expecting to send large quantities of councillors off to the Falkland Islands, even on one-way tickets or returns. But I think we need to be conscious that we do this to try to make sure that we're benefiting the local communities and the local firms. So we should not be spending large quantities of taxpayers' money on this. Matthew, I'm sure you'll agree with me on that.
Yes, and I just wanted to note that in the past, generally Portsmouth City Councillors, including Councillor Mason, have paid their own way when they visited
Indeed.
cities.
Okay. Colleagues, are you happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. We now come to the appointment to outside bodies and champions. Now, I have to say, on my paper copy, the A3 version has not, or it seems to have been expanded as opposed to reduced, so you only get a little bit of it. So I'm sorry, I'm going to take people through where we are with this, just to make sure that I've got everything sorted, and I have to make sure I've got the right bits of paper, which I now can't find. Hold on a second.
Leader.
Hello.
Now, remind you have a deputation from Councillor Udy for this item.
Yes, do. Can you read? That'd be wonderful, because that gives me the chance to finding things. So,
okay. So this is a deputation from Councillor Claire Udy. Hello everyone, Claire Udy here, and my pronouns are she, they. Sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm not sure if I'm allowed, but I am double-vaxxed and would like to hug and kiss many of you. I just wanted to speak a little bit on my first year as LGBT plus champion and why I'd like to carry on through my last year as a councillor. One of the last events I had attended before COVID was being voted in as an LGBT plus champion by service users and LGBTQ plus pupils of senior schools. We all had many plans, visiting schools, talking equalities, teaching people about LGBTQ plus issues, but obviously COVID took over and the progress was slow. Instead, after the initial lockdown, we have taken over the social media accounts within the council on more than one occasion in conjunction with the 4U service and have sought to engage with many residents of this city. One of my personal highlights was helping curate an assembly for primary age pupils, which was sent to all primary schools in the city and included yours truly reading a fantastic true story about two penguin daddies and Tango Makes Three, which was then turned into Portsmouth City Council's first bedtime story on Instagram Live. I even wrote a tiny little jingle for the show, which you can have for free if you want to have more bedtime stories. My calling was always going to be a children's television presenter, right? I really hope this year we can get out and about and that we can carry on the good work that the education and public health teams do in this city. As a council, we are currently going above and beyond with our service provision, and we should be incredibly proud. I also thank all the officers, Directorate, who have taken on board the problems we have encountered with some nasty organisations and individuals who have tried to silence us and stop the council from doing their work. Our service provision for LGBTQ plus young people is really flourishing, and since my time as a councillor, even before I was champion, I have helped to expand it up to 25 years and now a parents group. My aim is to secure the long-term funding for these services before I leave the council. 20 years ago, what I'm doing now would have been illegal. Myself and my friends, a whole generation of people missed out on a crucial education right in the midst of the AIDS crisis. I hope my role as champion and going forward is to make sure LGBTQ+ education accessible in schools and a crucial part of all young people's education. Here's to the next year and making Portsmouth a safe place to be LGBTQ+ and being fantastic allies. Can I please formally ask Cabinet to consider changing the name of the role to LGBTQ+ champion from LBGT+ champion? Also, could we please discuss the terms of reference for the Women's and Domestic Violence Champion, as I worry it could accidentally become trans-exclusionary? I just want reassurance that the Council commits to a definition when we say women. It means trans women too. Thank you, and congratulations, Councillor Mellor.
Okay, thank you. Folks, I've got 3 sets of lists, and I'm going to try to take people through, and I hope that we can do this fairly quickly and get the right things. The lists I've got are the ones where there are vacancies and with nominations. I've then got a list of things where people are already in place for a period and therefore we shouldn't change them. And I'm going to try to juggle those two, and then I'm going to come to champions at the end, if that's okay. So, colleagues, I'm just going to run through, and because of the paperwork, I'll try to be as quick as possible. So, Motivate, we've got space for 1 observer. We have 3 nominations: Charlotte Gerarda, Terry Norton and Susie Horton. And I'm proposing Susie Horton as the portfolio holder for children and young people. Colleagues, if there's anything you disagree with that I'm saying, please yell to members of the Cabinet. Education Advisory Board. We've got nominations from Tom Coles, Terry Norton, Ryan Brent and Susie Horton for the 4 places. Okay, everybody okay? Elementary Education Act, we've got 4 nominations. I'm very sorry, I think one person has dropped off your list, Jane, which is me. But I might be told I'm wrong. So I've got Terry Norton, Ryan Brent, Susie Horton, Hugh Mason, and I was on it last year and want to continue on it. Is that all right, Susie? Okay, thank you. On the Standing Educational Council for Religious Education, Tom Coles continues. I know both Maria Cole and Taki Jaffrey would like to continue, but Susie Horton has resigned, so we do have a vacancy remaining on this. Who has a burning desire to do religious education? Okay, we'll re-advertise and see if there's a person who wants to put themselves forward. Aspects Visual Arts Trust, we have 2 nominations for the 1 place. Judy Smythe and Chris Atwell, and my nomination is Chris Atwell, it's in his ward. Baffins Community Association, only Darren Sanders put himself forward. Buckland Community Association, 2 places, only 2 nominations, Jason Fazackley, Leo Madden. City of Portsmouth Sports Council, there are 3 places, and that is Scott Pater Harris and Ben Downing, but there is space for a Labour nomination as well if anybody wants it. Duke of Edinburgh's Award, 1 nomination, Chris Atwell. Eastney Area Community Association, 2 nominations to replace Jenny Brent. Linda Symes and Matthew Winnington, and I'm proposing Matthew Winnington. Farrington Marshes Management Committee, we've got 4 places, so Ben Swan to replace Terry Norton, Hugh Mason, Leo Madden, and there is 1 vacancy for anybody else who is interested in the Farrington Marshes Management Committee. I know it says there is actually a meeting on the 14th of November. Hugh, has this ever met within the last century?
It meets annually.
It does. Excellent. All right. I was about to say overjoyed, but I'm not. I'm pleased that it does happen. Franton Community Association, Dave Fuller to replace Dave Ashmore. Hampshire Archives Trust annual meeting. Ben Dowling, unless he's identified an appropriate officer. Mr. Dowling.
I think you can put my name down, leader, but somebody else may well attend.
I think it's Jane. It'll be Jane Mee, won't it?
Yes, I just haven't organised it.
Excellent. So we'll put Jane Mee down. Okay. International Boat Building Training College, Portsmouth. We don't know if this still existed. Jane, have you been building boats there? No. Well, we're not sure if it still exists, but if it does, we have two nominations, Lee Mason and Rob Wood, and as it's in St Thomas Ward, I think it's in St Thomas Ward, or if not, it's just banding, so I was going to go for Rob Wood. We then got the King's Theatre Trust Limited. Now, we had a discussion last year, because traditionally there has been one Conservative councillor and one Lib Dem councillor, and last year Linda Symes was nominated but was not a Conservative councillor, so Luke Stubbs kindly did that. I'm sorry to say that Luke, I don't think, has had the ability to attend any meetings, so we have three nominations, which is Linda Symes, Hugh Mason and Rob Wood, and unless I know otherwise, Linda Symes is not currently a member of the Conservative group. Matthew?
She was readmitted last week.
That is interesting.
I don't know if you want to comment, if you want my comments on these issues. I was going to save them up generally at the end, but since you raised that...
So I've had a request, because I've had a request from the King's Theatre to say what they really want is people with a business experience and a business brain, because coming out of COVID, not only they're wanting stability, but they're also wanting people who can help with the business side of it. And I know Hugh has been on for many years to give stability, and Rob comes from a private sector business background and runs his own business. So I think they were welcoming of those two things, which is what I would propose to do, because that's the skill set they've asked for. But Matthew, if you want to come in.
Sure. I mean, obviously, when it comes to Linda, I've nominated her for a reasonable number of things. I do know that we've already passed something which is in her ward, the Eastern Area Community Association, which you've nominated Matthew Winnington for, whereas he's, of course, not currently a ward councillor, whereas Linda is one of the currently ward councillors. And I would like to maintain the tradition of, wherever possible, of one from the main group and one from the main opposition group. I think generally where there are multiple spots, that is a good principle to proceed on. And obviously, if it remains a tradition and remains a convention, it's something we would respect if we're in leadership. However, obviously, the decision lies with you. I might say more on that later when we get to one of the other potential nominations.
Okay, so my feeling is that because it's been such a difficult year for the creative industries, and because of my role at the LGA, I talk to the Theatres Trust on a regular basis, etc., and there is a real risk to regional theatres across the country, that I think actually having Rob's business brain this year would be particularly helpful this year. But I think I absolutely recognise, Matthew, that we need to get, if we can, back to the tradition of making sure it's shared out. But for this year, because of the COVID crisis, I'd go with Hugh and Rob, but on the basis that we would then aim to get back to a position of sharing from next year on, just to make sure that we've got that tradition continues. So that's what would be my proposal for this year, and to try to make sure that we make it back to being one Conservative, one Lib Dem for the in future years. Okay, moving on. Landport Community Association, Claire Udy. Maritime Archaeology Trust, was Matthew Winnington, and I've got two nominations, John Smith and Kimberly Barrett. Kimberly, this is your degree area, isn't it? So it would seem to me that's a logical thing to do. Mary Rose Trust, we've got nominations from Linda Symes, Rob Wood and Frank Jonas as Lord Mayor, and I'm going to say yes to them all. Milton Village Community Association, Ben, to continue. On the new Theatre Royal, we've got 3 nominations. Judith Smythe, Linda Symes and Will Purvis. We are at a very, very delicate stage in the negotiation for buying the freehold of the new Theatre Royal, which we had all hoped that the lawyers would have completed many months ago, but are held up in legal. The person who is crucial to that on the side of the trust has been Will, has been the person making sure things have happened. And I would be very, very worried about losing his expertise. Now, I don't know once the sale has happened whether Will will want to carry on, but until that has happened, I'm very keen that we keep Will's expertise on that trust so that we can get that sale completed so that the new Theatre Royal does not become a pub. So that would be my nomination there. Overlord Embroidery, got 2 nominations, Linda Symes and Ben Dowling plus a vacancy. Anybody wanting to do that? There's a lunch. Okay, no takers for that. Paulsgrove Community Association.
Hang on. Yes, I'll do that.
You'll go lunching, okay?
No, I want to do the embroidery bit, not the lunching.
That's the lunch. All right, you want to do the embroidery? Yes. Excellent. Okay, Paulsgrove Community Association, George Madgwick, only nomination. Portsmouth Royal Dockyard Historical Trust, Frank Jonas or Rob Wood, and Rob would like to do that. Stacey Community Management Association, Darren, you've put yourself forward for that, and nobody else has. Stamshaw and Tipner Community Association, 1 nomination, Lee Hunt. West Paulsgrove Scout and Community Association, George Madgwick, where there was a vacancy last year, which is good to fill that up. Scopac, Hugh Mason. LGA Coastal Issues Specialist Interest Group, Hugh Mason. Porchester Crown, there was a nomination from Lee Mason, but it's got to be cabinet members. Yeah, don't worry. So that's Hugh Mason and Dave Ashmore. Portsmouth Plastic-Free Coastline Steering Group, 2 nominations, Kimberly Barrett and Charlotte Gerarda, and I'm going to go for Kimberly. It just sits well with that portfolio. Moving on, Project Integra Strategic Board. It was Dave Ashmore and continues to be Dave Ashmore, but with Graham Heaney was deputy last year, but there is no nominee for a deputy. So again, vacancies to be on the list for the next time we do these. Solent Sea Rescue, Lee Hunt. Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, which Matthew tells me is interesting. No nominations. Matthew. So should we appoint Matthew?
My father runs the North West.
There.
I wouldn't be able to attend because of work commitments.
All right. I think they all take place at sea. Southern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, Hugh Mason with Dave Ashmore as deputy. Trading Standards South East, Stuart Brown. The Lord Mayor of Portsmouth Coronation Homes Board, Lord Mayor. Portsmouth and District Friendly Society, Gerald Van Jackson, Ben Downing and Cal Corkery are the 3 current ones, but we're trying to subsume it into something bigger. Fratton Big Local. We have 2 nominations, Stuart Brown and Tom Coles, and I'm suggesting Stuart Brown with Tom Coles as deputy, as Tom was deputy last year. The Honour White almshouses, Hugh, you say they don't exist. Have you demolished them?
No, the almshouses don't exist, but the trust that exists and meets to distribute to deserving single women in the parish of Wimmering, and after that to any person within the city of Portsmouth. So it does exist.
So when did you demolish these almshouses?
1598.
Excellent. And you remember it well?
It was a good year, yes.
Okay. Interesting piece of history. Thank you. Next one, easy. Darren, you're down for easy. And then easy. It's Improvement and Efficiency South East. It's run by Paul Betterson, the leader of Bracknell Forest. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Hampshire and Isle of Wight LGA. Judith Smythe, Lee Mason, and Matthew. Yes, Matthew, your deputy, and Darren Saunders as a full member. We've just missed the AGM, so you can't be appointed to any outside bodies, which you'll all be relieved about.
I actually went.
And were you thrilled, Matthew?
It was very interesting.
Donna ended up as chair of it one year and was furious. Good. So, Darren, you're easy. And then non-exec director of Easy is Rob Wood. Port Advisory Board the nominations are Claire Udy, Judith Smythe, Matthew Atkins, with Ryan as our deputy, Kimberly and Hugh, and I think I'm ex officio because the port is in my portfolio. But that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Yeah, okay, so that's the right number. So Matthew.
Oh, John, I think I put that the wrong way round. I think I meant to have round Brent as the nominee and me as the deputy. He's my Pred cabinet member.
Fine. So we'll swap those round. But actually, that only leaves you one person on there. Should we expand it to 6? Then you can both be invited to all the meetings.
Sure, yeah.
Because the reason I created it was for people to learn what the port does, and it's a useful forum. Okay, Guildhall Trust. Now this is one's on the list. So at the moment it's Peter Gunn and Ben French, and where is it on this list? It's Guildhall Trust. 4 years. So Peter Gunn was appointed in 2020, so his term should carry on till 2024. So he's not up. But Ben French was appointed in 2018, and that is now over 4 years. And I'm happy to recommend that.
Gerald, it's not.
Isn't it?
No, 2021 is 3 years.
Oh, sorry, my maths is really not good. My apologies. So those ones are ones that we shouldn't change because they're 4-year terms. So now I've got lost. Okay, so we now got Portsmouth Naval-Based Property Trust, and we have the nominations are Cal Corkery, Lee Mason, Matthew Atkins, Terry Hall and Steve Pitt, and my proposal is to carry on with Steve Pitt and Terry Hall. Push Joint Committee, Hugh Mason with Matthew Atkins as deputy. Push Overview and Scrutiny, Judith Smythe with Ryan Brent as deputy. Sigoma is Lee Mason, and Hugh, you used to do this, and meetings take place in Barnsley, from memory.
Normally, yes.
Lee Mason has been nominated for that, and there's a vacancy if anybody else wants to go to Barnsley. Matthew.
Sorry, I was going to say I was going to come on the Portsmouth.
Okay, sorry, beg your pardon, leap in. Okay, let's run through and see where we get to. So if there's anybody else who'd like to go to Barnsley, St Thomas Cathedral Council, only one nomination, Chris Atwell. Building Control Partnership, is Hugh Mason and Ryan Brent have been nominated. We have one place, and it's logical that it's the Cabinet member. Hampshire Buildings Preservation Trust Annual Meeting, John Smith is the only nomination, so John gets that. Minerals and Waste Development Framework Members Steering Group, ex officio to Hugh Mason. Patch Limited, we've got 3 nominations for 3 places, which is Cal Corkery, Chris Atwell, Ian Holder. Solent Forum, 1 place, Hugh Mason, Ryan Brent. Hugh, what does Solent Forum do?
I have no idea. I've never been invited to a meeting yet.
In which case, should we send Ryan?
Yes, why not?
Do we know what it does, Jane, as you're sending us here?
I don't, but I can find out for you, Chair.
It's an adjunct to the LEP and the leaders' meetings, of course.
Okay, in which case it should then be, I'm sorry, it should be a member of the administration. So, Hugh, I'm very sorry, you will have to do this instead of Ryan. Tourism South East, 2 places, Scott Pater Harris and Ben Dowling. Fine. Haifa Portsmouth Friendship Group, we've got 3 nominations for 5 places, which is Lee Mason, Hugh Mason, Dave Ashmore. Any other late nominations, Jane? Okay, Matthew added, and there's one more vacancy. To make sure we've got politically balanced, should we put Tom Coles back on it as well? Yes. Okay. Well, I don't, even if he's not. We need to be inclusive. South East Employers. Matthew, I have to say, we're allowed 3 and 3 deputies. Matthew, you're the only person who wants to go.
There, Matthew.
Yeah. So that's another one. Then National Parking Adjudication Services Management Committee, now known by the snappier title of Parking and Traffic Regulation Outside London's in brackets Patrol, which is meant to be the Cabinet member plus a deputy, so it's Lynn plus Kevin McGee. The next one is even more fun, which is the Bus Lane Adjudication Service Joint Committee Blastjuk, which is linked to Patrol, which I think is Lynn Stagg with Simon Bosher as deputy. You do bus lane adjudications. It's whether people have driven down the wrong bus gate. Solent Transport Joint Committee, Lynn Stagg. And the Transport Liaison Group is Graham Heaney, Simon Bosher and Lynn Stagg. The ones where so Portsmouth Adoption Panel, we don't have a nomination from anybody. Now, I can think of nothing that is more important than that. Lynn, you'll do it, okay? Because if we can get, it's now being subsumed, so it's not just Portsmouth, it's in the south. So I think we need to check, but if we get a nomination, you're happy to do it. But it seems to me there is nothing more important than making sure we indeed, absolutely, that we get this right. The Children's Trust Board carries on, and that's Susie Horton, Rob Wood, Ryan Brent and Judith Smythe. Tom Coles is staying on Sackree. Ben Swan is staying on the Hampshire Countryside Access Forum. Safer Portsmouth Partnership doesn't meet in its same way anymore. Portsmouth Fostering Panel is Jeanette Smith. Portsmouth and Havant Joint Board doesn't exist anymore. Fitzherbert and Moody is for 4 years and they're only in year 3. And that's Dave Fuller and Luke Stubbs. Shareholder committees of Raven will come back to at a later meeting. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Community Foundation is Rob Wood for 5 years from 1918. And the Guildhall Trust we've done. European City Twinning Committee meets every 2 months. Lord Mayor, Jeanette Smith, Lynn Stagg, Lee Mason and Linda Symes. I didn't know it existed, but I'm sure that's right. And then, quickly, I'm sorry, going to run through then the last. So, we've also had a request from St James's Memorial Park Trust for nomination to replace former Councillor Caroline Scott, who, since she's died. But I'd suggest we do that at the next meeting, when if we can go through and fill up.
I think both myself and Councillor Barrett are already on it, but I'm not 100% because it hasn't met for so long.
Yeah, well, okay, I think it is about to, but we want somebody to replace Caroline. Champions. Sorry, beg your pardon, Susie.
On the Sacre one, I've just realised that Ryan Brent has been on it all the time that he's not been a councillor. So if could he transfer his position to being the councillor rep? The only reason I'm saying that is because you need certain people in different groups for it to be able to operate, and as I've resigned, then it may be that the next meeting, which is probably not till after the summer, it might not be able to happen unless we've got someone in place before then, but he might want to just change his type of membership.
Well, we've got another meeting before then, so let's see if Jane can make sure that we've got that. Okay, in terms of champions, and I just hope I get this right, folks, and I apologise if I don't. Heritage champion is Lee Hunt, and Lee is as now he's chair of planning, is uncertain about carrying on in that role. So what I was going to do is to leave that to the next meeting, because he worries that if he's chair of planning and heritage champion, that might be difficult with planning applications. The LGBTQ plus champion, Claire Udy. Children and young people's champion is Susie, and I think, Susie, we were talking about effectively subsuming that back into being the portfolio, because you're cabinet member, and therefore subsume it back into the cabinet member role. Armed Forces liaison champion is me, and I think it has to be a cabinet member, but it doesn't have to be the leader, so it could be somebody else. Third sector and city of service champion, we've got 2 nominations, either Stuart Brown or Jeanette Smith, and I would go with Stuart Brown. Mental health champion was Matthew Winnington, and I had been tempted to say that we would subsume it back into the lead portfolio cabinet member role, but Jeanette Smith has also put in a nomination, but I think the logic of it being the cabinet member is very sound, so I'd go with Jason, but subsume it into the position of being a cabinet member. Homelessness champion, Darren Sanders, you have preventing homelessness in your title as cabinet member, so again subsume that in. The women and domestic violence thing from Kirsty Mellor seems very sensible. I think we should listen to what Claire said in terms of making sure that this doesn't become something where there is a conflict, and if we are very clear that women, and we need to write this down, that women, and it should be actually women and children and domestic violence, that women include people who are trans women as well, and be very clear. Matthew.
I did complete, and I thought I had submitted a complete list of nominations from our group for these champion positions.
I haven't
as well.
seen. No, Matthew, what have we missed then? So tell us what I've missed, sorry.
Can you read them out again, and I'll try and remember.
Heritage, I'm putting off. So I'm going to put that off and not make an appointment of this one. LGBTQ plus.
New was the nominee.
So this was one where the young people chose who it was, and I think it would be wrong for us not to respect. Yeah. Children children and young people, I was just subsuming back into the cabinet member role.
Okay, I didn't nominate for it.
No. The Armed Forces Champion.
I nominated Frank Jones for there,
Well, my understanding, Matthew, is if we're to retain our gold accreditation as an employer, it has to be a cabinet member. And we've worked really hard to get that accreditation, and I wouldn't lost. Okay. Third sector city of service. Did you have somebody for that, Matthew?
was Chairman new, but I cannot be 100% certain.
So I'm tempted to go with Stuart on the. Yeah. The mental health champion, I was subsuming back into the. And is he your spokesperson for adult social care?
He's actually not, but he has a personal interest in mental health because of his own relationship with mental health.
What have I got?
Sorry, I've just got a message from Councillor Corkery saying that they've obviously submitted some labels, but have you got the list?
I haven't. Look, in which case, with all the champions roles, can we put them all off to the next meeting, if that's all right? Because if we've had a problem with getting both stuff from the Labour group and the Conservative group, I want to make sure that we... So if people carry on as normal, if that's all right, Darren.
However, Gerald, can I suggest that we get two things into the minutes of this meeting? And the first is to agree with Claire Udy's suggestion about creating an LGBTQ plus champion. And then the second bit is to ensure that the role of the women's and domestic violence champion also includes those who are transitioning women.
Well, not even transitioning, but people who are trans women, who self-identify as female. So, because people are both transitioning, but also when they've reached the point of status. There's also there's been a suggestion of having a nature champion, and Kimberly has put herself forward for that. And one that's not been on the list but needs to be is the learning disability champion, which John Attrell has done that role for some time. So if we, Lynn.
Yes, I think I'm right in saying that as far as domestic abuse is concerned, I think something like 19% of the victims are men, not just women. Yeah. So I think maybe we need to consider putting that in.
So let's have a think before we get to the next meeting, but it gives us a little bit of time to see if we can get a report written about champions and maybe get some definitions in which might help. So if it's okay, colleagues, what I'm going to suggest is that we keep everybody who's in post for the minute, but we come back next cabinet meeting to go through these, because I want to make sure we've got all the nominations in, so we can look at everything in a sensible way. With that, I think, Matthew. Do Matthew, leap in.
Trust. I didn't want to make a huge issue about this, but I have had a conversation with you about this before. I do feel that this isn't just a role that affects one ward or is a sort of single organisation. This is a very large organisation, the Naval Base Property Trust, that controls very important strategic property in the city. And also, I do think we have to recognise it's one of the small number of roles that actually adds additional compensation. So there is a honorarium attached to this of around £7,000 to £10,000, I think, which isn't a huge sum of money, but it is financially compensated. And I do think that as a result, both of the importance of the role strategically to the city and its significance, and as a result of the financial compensation, actually this is something where there should be nominations of sitting city councillors. I think the danger with nominating people who are not city councillors is it looks somewhat nepotistic. It looks like jobs being handed out to people on a rather opaque basis, because obviously it's not open to scrutiny by the council, it's not open to scrutiny by the public, and I'm not actually calling into question in any way the expertise of Terry Hall and Steve Pitt, who I obviously know Steve Pitt. I don't know Terry Hall, but I recognise she was on this for many years. But I do think from a point of view of accountability, these should actually be roles that go to sitting councillors. I've also expressed that it's my opinion, and I have nominated Lee Mason, sitting councillor, myself if there wasn't another, but there is another nominee. Cal Corkery has nominated himself. So there are city councillors willing to do this role, and I suspect there would be talent, and I think it's rather a negative commentary on the talent within the chamber to suggest that these are not roles that there is expertise to fill within members of the City Council. So I do feel quite strongly that these should be nominations because of accountability, not looking like this is something which is handed out to cronies or friends, that it's City Councillors who take the roles. I would prefer a tradition, as there are two roles and it's such an important aspect of the city. It is strategically important, and it's a statutory trust requirement that there were one from each of the two largest groups. I think that would be a good convention. I would follow that convention if that was one that was in place. But my strongest point is I do think they should be sitting councillors. And the issue really with the nominations of Jay Hall and Steve Pitt is neither of them are currently sitting councillors. And I just don't feel that's appropriate, and I do think Cabinet should take that into serious consideration. If two non-sitting councillors are given this role, I do think that that is something I might want to raise further at full council or beyond, because I do think that is something that should require scrutiny, because they are a small number of roles that attract relatively significant financial compensation. And that was my point on that. So I do think with two roles it makes sense if it was the two largest groups, although Cal Corkery has put himself forward, and my main concern is that I think these should be sitting councillors, because I think they should be accountable to council as well, so that if we have an issue with what's going on at the Naval Base Property Trust, we can inquire as of that person in the council chamber as well in that role. So that was what I wanted to say particularly on that. I mean, across the board, I do feel like today there has been a somewhat expansion of the administration party's nominations to various different organisations, though I have made my position clear on the other positions where we've discussed that, and it was not a huge number, but I do think that there is also that creeping sense, and I thought that about the champions as well, but it looks like you didn't receive my nominations, so I think that's the reasoning for that. But I did feel strongly about this issue of the Naval Base Property Trust, so I did wanted to make that point, and I do think you should take it into consideration and consider nominating a member of your own group who is a current sitting councillor, and then take into consideration appointing a member of one of the other groups. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. I think two quick points. In exactly the same way as with other cultural organisations, this coming year is going to be incredibly difficult for the property trust, and there are real risks there. So having for a year stability and working with people who they know and where we've got definite skills, I think would be very valuable to them. But I think you make a good point in ordinary time in terms of making sure that that there are councillors on this, and I think that would be the intention for future. But COVID has hit the companies and organisations and charities who are reliant on the visitor economy, people buying tickets to come in, very, very hard. And therefore I think for this year there is a good reason for an exception, but I don't think that exception would last into the future. So at that point then I'm going to, those are all the nominations. I hope, Jane, you've managed to keep up with all of those and running around. So that is the close of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Jane, what do I need to do? You need to turn us off. So thank you very much indeed, everybody, for turning up. We look forward to seeing you again, and there is another meeting of the Cabinet scheduled for next month, and I can't remember when. But Peter will know.